You're watching Inside Story. I'm Ray Suarez. Black robes, gray hair this time on the program. There are 4 justices who are all clustered around 80 years old. We're talking about the reasonable assumption that the next president, whoever that may be, could have a big impact on the makeup of the court for a long time to come. Joining me now are Alan Porter Mendenhall, an attorney from Montgomery, Alabama, who writes about the Supreme Court, and Gabe Roth, executive director of Fix the Court, a group that advocates for change and transparency in the operation of the nation's highest court. Welcome to Inside Story. Alan Porter Mendenhall, should voters be more conscious of who's picking Supreme Court justices when they head into their polling places next November?
I think so. I think as much as the president is on the ballot in 2016, the Supreme Court's on the ballot. If you accept this concept that there's a 4-4 split with Kennedy in the middle as a swing vote, then you know that the court's going to be tipped one way or the other. Only 4 presidents in history have not nominated a candidate to the Supreme Court. 2 of those died, and their immediate successors have nominated somebody. And Jimmy Carter is the most recent president not to. So you can be pretty certain that the next president will get to nominate somebody. And given that 4 justices will be in their 80s during the next administration's 4-year term, I think the likelihood is even higher. And if there is an opportunity to nominate 4, then we're talking, if there's a Republican president with a 54-member majority in the Senate, we're talking about a potential for a 7-2 majority for the Republicans, a 7-2 majority on the court for the right wing of the court. Now, on the other hand, the Democrats have the potential to get a 6-3 majority if things were to swing that way and they were to replace Kennedy and replace Scalia, which is no small replacement given Scalia's conservative voting record.
Gabe, you heard David Schuster touch on it earlier. Do you believe that justices game their retirements? Unless they have to leave, they keep an eye on the politics of it, who's in the Senate and who's in the Oval Office.
I definitely think that they do, Ray, and it's a shame, really. There shouldn't be any partisan politics at the Supreme Court. We know that hasn't been the case. There has been a lot of partisanship at the highest court, but it's supposed to be the apolitical branch. Politics is supposed to be out of the court. And you know, what we at Fix the Court advocate for is a standard 18-year term for Supreme Court justices. So every 2 years, there would be a new justice coming in, 2 times 9 justices, so that would be an 18-year term. So that's what we've been advocating for, and that's what we hope that the next individual nominated to the Supreme Court will pledge to serve only 18 years. And we think that that's plenty of time to talk about conservative justices and liberal justices. That's not an ideal situation for the American people. The court should be above politics, and the current way it's construed, it's not. And we need to find creative solutions to make it so that it returns, instead of right now being the most powerful, least accountable branch, it needs to return to be the apolitical branch, which is how the founders envisioned.
Alan Porter Mendenhall, would that take some of the pressure off of this whole conversation if we would depoliticize the court a little bit?
Well, I think it probably would, but I'm not sure. I mean, I hear this one recommendation. I'm not sure, how that would square with the provision that in the Constitution that the justices can serve under good behavior. But one problem I see is that the Constitution is itself the most apolitical element of the justice's job, but we have so many years of precedents and the doctrine of stare decisis, by which justices follow precedents. It's an old common law doctrine, and now you have precedents on top of the Constitution, and unless you can get underneath all those precedents, I'm not sure you're going to be able to get to the apolitical Constitution.
Well, Gabe is also suggesting term limits, and when you look at something like Justice Kennedy, who's been around for 27 years, Antonin Scalia, who's been around a similar length of time, they get to cast a pretty long shadow across American history from whatever legal tendency they come from. People didn't live that long in 1789. Were we really planning to have a court like this? First, Gabe.
No, I don't think the founders were. I mean, the average life expectancy at the time of the Constitution was about 50 years old, so they definitely weren't expecting that. I think the way the current system is built, what you have is presidents are what they try to do is they find the most ideological individual who's young enough, who's old enough to have some experience, but young enough that they can survive another 40 years. So you look at the last set of nominees. Roberts was 50, Kagan was 50, Alito and Sotomayor also in their 50s. Instead of nominating someone who's maybe 60 years, maybe a little bit more pragmatic, what the presidents are incentivized to do under the current system is to find somebody who is very ideological and already has these entrenched views. I mean, most of the justices on the Supreme Court worked in a presidential administration. Whether it was Reagan or Ford or even Obama, most of them have worked in a presidential administration. And I don't think that's necessarily helpful to the future of the country, where you want disinterested third parties deciding how to interpret our laws.
Alan, did this latest era that Gabe defines really start with Clarence Thomas, who was young, who was ideological, and could be expected to be around for a long time on the bench?
Well, I do think it probably started about that time, and clearly it's become the trend. I think in the past 30 years or so, justices have started serving upwards of 20 years on average, whereas historically they served under 15 years. So I can't imagine any president going into office thinking, oh, I think it would be a good idea to nominate somebody that I think is only going to be on the court for a decade or so. So the whole system is structured to incentivize the nomination of someone who can stay on for a long time. And so I can't blame the president for wanting to do it. I can't blame senators who are under a lot of pressure from special interest groups and these sorts of things to want to nominate somebody who is going to comport with their long-term vision for America and for the courts. Now, whether that system itself is a good thing, whether structurally that's a good thing, now that's another question. One interesting thing that I'm hearing Gabe say about the age, it raises a good point about the Constitution, which provides no mechanism for a Supreme Court justice who is incapacitated in some way, is, say, in a vegetative state, or is in a coma, or in some sort of situation like that. There's no mechanism constitutionally for removing that person from office if that person can't voluntarily do so. I guess the only thing you
that's
could
happened
do is
from time to
impeach
time.
that
Go ahead,
person.
Gabe. A quick response.
A number of the justices. I'm not going to name names here necessarily, but a number of the justices, we've seen stats or heard inside stories who've recently retired, had this sort of level of mental decrepitude towards the end of their careers, and it's sad and it's sorry. And these are all, even thinking about the justices today, as partisan as they may be, these are all incredible scholars, and we at Fix the Court respect them a great deal. However, there is a limit to the amount of term that we believe that they should serve. And I think it's in the best interest of the country if they, spend more time with their grandkids after a certain tenure on the court.
Gabe Roth of Fix the Court, blogger and attorney Alan Porter Mendenhall. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on Inside Story.